Welcome in to Greenville Grit. This is Greenville Residents in Touch with your hosts, Terry Williams and Michael Overton. This is the show that keeps you connected and in touch with the issues that affect what's happening in your community. Greenville Grit is sponsored by Greenville Toyota, the Overton Group. And now, here are your hosts for Greenville Grit, Terry Williams and Michael Overton.
Good evening and welcome to Greenville Grit. I'm Terry Williams.
I'm Michael Overton, and Terry, we have the real Greenville Gritter on tonight,
Yeah,
Mayor Alan Thomas.
How are you guys?
Good,
Good.
Alan.
Good to
Thank
have
you for
you.
coming on.
Thank you. This is my first opportunity to be on Greenville Grit. Excited to be here. Thank
we
you.
appreciate it, and in case, hopefully you've listened to the Greenville Grit at some point, but we talk about the issues facing Greenville Residents in Touch, and
That's right.
want to make sure people know what's going on, the good, the bad, the ugly, in the city of Greenville, so we're going to put you on it today. But before we do that, we always have to thank our sponsors,
That's
Terry.
right.
We've got a big announcement. You don't even know about it yet, but
Yeah,
Ribeye
you told me a little
Steakhouse.
bit,
No,
little
I haven't
bit.
told you this. Ribeye Steakhouse. If you mention Greenville Grit until next Wednesday,
That's right.
you get a 25% discount
Everybody
at
needs
Ribeye
to go.
Steakhouse. So make
That
sure you
includes
go.
guests, right?
That's you,
Everybody.
Mayor.
Yeah,
Anyone who
absolutely.
goes to Ribeye Steakhouse for the next 7 days gets a
What if it includes
25%
us?
discount. I asked Joey that. He kind of smiled, but I'm going to try it.
Well, we'll bring a crowd.
Make sure you mention Greenville Grit. We also have got to thank Greenville Toyota if you need a new Toyota or Scion vehicle or need a new used car. Call Craig Ghost and the Greenville Toyota team at 321-3000 or go to greenvilletoyota.com. Also, the Overton Group.
Thank you, Michael.
Office here in New Bern and in Greenville for commercial real estate leasing and sales, property management, business brokers, and residential real estate. Please give us a call, 355-7006 or ovtgroup.com.
That's right.
We are going to go to a quick commercial break. We're going to come back with the Greenville Gritter, and we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Eastern Carolina.
Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. This is Michael Overton along with my co-host Terry Williams and the famous Mayor Alan Thomas of Greenville. Thank you for coming on with us, Alan. You got that smirk on your face. What's going
You
on?
say famous. I'm not sure about that.
Come on, man. Every time we turn around, you're on the TV.
you're on TV.
I'm fifth in line in my household, and that's all that matters. Everybody
Well,
has
I understand
3 or 4
that. I'm
kids.
fourth in line with mine.
Understand how that
you're,
works.
You're the face of Greenville, and,
Well,
and
we
we're
have two
proud of
kids
it.
that
You're
are
doing a really good job. We're proud
extremely
of it.
close in age. I completely sympathize with that. So, thank you for coming on the show. We got
Sure.
a lot going on in Greenville, and we've finished up a very controversial budget period. I think most people will say controversial because
say.
there were 3 tax raises put in by City Council over a 45-day period. I know that 2 of the tax increases got passed through, but I wouldn't mind hearing from your standpoint where are we at in terms of the decisions made to go forward. I mean, what is your feeling on this?
Well, all budget processes are contentious to some degree, whether it's on the federal level, as we all see, gridlock, the state level, which they're going through their conference committees now between the House and the Senate, trying to come to some final decisions on teachers' pay and many other very important items for the future of North
Teacher
Carolina.
assistants.
Yes,
really
for
important.
TAs right now, very important, and so many other issues. And the city is no different. We do a 2-year budget. Whereas in 2012 we did a 2-year budget, and now here again in 2014. What it allows you to do is for your city government and your city services to have an established 24-month period of pretty much a locked-in perspective on what they're going to be able to provide the city. Now, they will step in at month 12 and look for slight adjustments, but for the most part, Wayne Bowers initiated this many years ago when he was city manager, and it's been good policy, especially when you have councils that are elected every 2 years.
Right.
It allows them to kind of set a tone for a period of time. Now, the Greenville city proper, in terms of government, our final budget, what we actually vote on every 2 years, is close to $500 million in funding in the city of Greenville. Now, that includes many different things: the airport authority, the city general fund, our many enterprise funds.
The Greenville Utilities
We
also.
actually vote for the final budget for Greenville Utilities. Now, Greenville Utilities is a semi-autonomous board. They are in charge of creating their own rate increases and many of the things they do. But ultimately, as they like to say, the buck stops here. We have to, we're ultimately those are our assets as a city, which GUC manages and runs. So it's a busy time, and especially when you have new council members. We have a couple of new council members this year. The dynamic is a little different this time than maybe the past couple of years. So there's been a learning curve for some of the new council members. Right. But when it gets right down to it, you got to dive in, be prepared, know your budgets, know your history in Greenville, and create a plan that's going to help us thrive and grow going forward.
Well, let's talk about the tax increases, though, because I'm a believer that tax increases, you increase your tax base. That's how you increase your revenues, and that doesn't come through tax increases. And I know we've discussed that on our previous shows, as long as when having Dennis Mitchell on here. You know, your feelings on that, and is there any chance over the next year that we can at least take a look at that to see if we can repeal part or all of these tax increases?
Well, I think everything is always on the table when it comes to reaching in city citizens' pockets. I opposed the tax increases proposed by Calvin Mercer and also Marion Blackburn. And in my opinion, those were tax increases by choice, not by necessity. Now, we did have some unusual situations this year. We had a forecasted income from Greenville Utilities, which pays in like a fund to the city to help cover services. They had a shortfall in their payment into the city, and then they subsequently went and raised rates across the board in many areas. Also, we had the privilege license component that the state looked at and decided to take an accelerated move to reduce privilege license, which is what we use to be able to cover the extended costs of our commercial districts. We have a couple of businesses, I won't say by name, that had close to 1,000 service calls in 1 year. So fire, police, rescue, other services. These are all services that the average homeowner may not need at all, or maybe once or twice throughout the year. But we want our commercial zones to be safe and vibrant, so we believe that's an important component. 2 years ago, when I first came on board as mayor in 2011, I was greeted with the remnant of the Great Recession. And for Greenville, we hadn't done an adjustment in our property values in a number of years. And so 2011, welcome to Greenville. We had the first loss in property value in the city since the Great Depression of the 20s and 30s. And how does that impact city government? Well, revenues are derived for us to be able to have police, fire, rescue, everything we do based on the formula of property and property tax rates and things of that nature. So we took, when the city loses $300 and some million in value, then the city loses millions of actual disposable available funds to be able to work with. Now, 2 years ago, the approach that we took is the same way I would look at it in my business. We asked every department, we set up a new budget process where we had every single department in the city to come before council and to pitch their budget. Talk about their priorities, talk about needs versus wants, what needed to be done now, and what could be bridged over for the next several years. And that process in itself actually saved several $1 million for the city of Greenville. We really put the spotlight on that's the most transparent budget probably ever done in the city of Greenville. That was all on television, recorded, and it was great to have a department head come in and talk about their budget. Now, traditionally, Greenville has not done that. Traditionally, the city manager walks in with a big book and drops it on your desk, and you may have a couple of meetings where you discuss certain aspects, but at the end of the day, especially with new council members this year, you're asked to come in and make a decision. So 2 years ago, I thought it was a very successful process. It ended up saving the city several $1 million. We also were able to give a slight cost of living adjustment to city employees and for the taxpayers. We cut taxes $2.3 million in year one and $2.3 million in the second year.
And that cut taxes, is that because of the devaluation of the property taxes?
Cut taxes because we actually cut our spending. When we went in and looked into departments, the actual amount of money that we took in, the recommendation from city staff was a 4-cent tax increase across the board. But we looked at the aspect the utilities were raising costs,
Right.
the other elements, food, gas, medicine, all the things that, and I try to look at this like a parent and a family member, and I really look at our seniors as well. When you're on fixed incomes, and many of our families are struggling to get out of, as we said, the recessional period, which we were slowly coming out of. Do you tighten your belt as a city and focus on economic development items, or do you make the decision to raise taxes? So our decision 2 years ago was to not raise taxes. We declined that and to actually tighten the budget.
Right.
And we actually redirected a significant amount of income towards economic development, which had never been done in the city of Greenville. The first Office of Economic Development we started in 2011. And the dividends on that have been great.
Yeah, they have, and they have been. I've actually in my business have dealt with Carl Reese quite a bit, and I would say it's been a successful decision to go forward. And it's frustrating too, as we meet with Dennis on this show, that there doesn't seem to be as much of a focus with the new council on economic development.
Well, there's talk of it, but where the rubber meets the road is actual. Talk's cheap, actions louder than words, as they say. We have a new council now, and just going through the new budget process, having set the context of what we did 2 years ago, this period was quite different. We had a couple of council members, Councilmember Mercer and Blackburn, who opposed many elements of the budget process. They voted against the budget process 2 years ago, which ended up being successful. Right. Calvin said it would cost $1 million plus to be able to start an economic development office. It needed to be studied for a year or so. Rather than do that, we went to work.
Right.
Day one, first meeting after being elected, and got that in. And I think that's had great success.
That's right.
Now we're at another period. We've got two different council members on, and the context of council is different. Rather than continuing the budget process of going through each department, they went back to the old way of budgeting, which is fine if that's the decision of the majority of council. The mayor doesn't vote, but I definitely have a pulpit, and I try to, try to speak from my experience. So this past year, we went back to the old process, and there were some challenges, as I mentioned, with shortfall with GUC on some funding, and legislatively some reduction in revenues. And we also added an entirely new fund this year for facilities maintenance, which if you have a house or a business,
Right.
if you're not ready to pay for those new HVACs or put that new roof on your apartment building or whatever you may have,
Right.
that's going to be a rude awakening.
Yep.
So, that is something I'm very proud of that Bryant Kittrell actually proposed several years ago of slowly building a fund.
Yeah, but the problem was that fund came through the process of having a tax increase.
Well, and that was the point of contingency in this budget, which I opposed. And I do have a business background, and looking through the budget, there are several areas where we had available funds, where we probably had an excess in income more than what we had anticipated. In the vehicle replacement fund, several million in excess that we could have accessed without having missed a beat.
Right.
And also in our health fund, which we specifically set money aside, which we have a significant amount of excess there as well, and a few other funds that we had areas of
It's like
adjustment.
the town commons, 150,000 is
just
sitting aside, not being
used.
It wasn't.
Well-
It'd be one thing if it was appropriated for something, but it wasn't.
That's right. We're getting back just a minute to the way you did the budget process. It just makes perfect sense to me to do it the way you all did it in 2011 when you started that process, because it informs every council member much deeper about exactly what's happening in the city and with the money. I don't know how you can sit down. I mean, it's a lot to consume in just the short amount of time they were given to consume that budget this time, and not having the interaction, like you said, no interaction with the different departments.
Yeah.
I don't even know how you can make a good, solid decision without, being able to have more time to study it,
Well, close-
which to me was obvious in the meetings.
Well,
I'm
close
sorry.
to 800 employees. I mean,
Yeah.
the city of Greenville is we talk about the university being, a backbone of the city, is. And we talk about Vidant Health and other areas being the large pillars of employment. Well, the city of Greenville
Right.
is one of the largest
That's exactly
pillars of
right.
employment, if not the close therein. Yes, with new members of council, my suggestion and my thought was to go back into a similar process that would really be a great learning curve for our new council members. But, a majority on council, there's a 4-2 vote block on council.
Right.
And, decisions were made to go in a different direction, which we've seen. And and some would probably argue some pretty disturbing decisions at times, things being added to the agenda last minute without giving the public a chance to provide
Right.
input. something that a couple of council members, Mr. Mercer and others, complained about in
past,
previous
that's
years.
right.
They turn around and
Exactly.
apply the exact practice, but this time not on a small item,
Big
on your
items.
tax increase.
Huge items.
So a tax increase added to the agenda, which was not discussed. And I had spoken to every council member prior to that meeting, either by text or phone, and said anything that we're going to discuss.
Right.
And it was meant to specifically be talking about the bond advisory and things of that nature. So we the majority of council, council members Blackburn and Mercer and Croskery and
Right.
Smiley decided to move forward with a increase in income, as you would put it, through that path, going to the citizens. And it really concerns me because I am worried about what that means for things like our roads and infrastructure,
Right.
which needs a boost.
Well, let's talk about
Definitely.
that.
Yep.
I got a report. I think it's for people who really do pay close attention to what's going on in the city. Terry Boardman, resident of the city, has really been going wide open over the last
Yes, he
several
has.
days. Question things. So one of the reports that was sent out was the 2013 mill and resurfacing list, and I don't even know if you've seen this or even know about it, but I do find it interesting that the heaviest restructuring was done on First Street, very heavily traveled road. I think we would all agree is important. The second heaviest was on Red Banks Road. You know, the third most square yardage done, Terry, I'm not going to put Alan on the spot on this.
I'm
River
looking at
Hills
it.
Drive.
River Hills.
River Hills Drive, the home
lives
of
in
Marion
River Hills?
Blackburn, one of our council members.
Exactly.
Do the council, now, this could be completely ironic. One of my best friends lived in River Hills, and I can tell you the road was bad.
Yeah.
I do know that. But do council members have any input on which roads are done?
Well, I don't know. Does a legislator have input on what projects are done across the
Right,
state?
that's right.
I guess you would ask that
So I guess you
question.
answered the question for everybody on that.
So did this list of the resurfacing list of all these streets come from the road study? Is there
The-
not a road study done?
the-
Well,
there-
the road study was finished.
It
there
wasn't
has been
finished.
a,
So
Well, one
how
of the
did this come about without, where'd the input come?
Well,
Just riding around
his-
inspection?
history on the roads in Greenville, we get several $1 million in Powell bill money every year.
Explain what the POW bill is for the general
Yeah,
public
they
on that.
probably-
What that is part of the gas tax. That
Okay.
it's the part that actually makes it back to the cities to be able to keep your roads paved.
Okay.
The city of Greenville has over 700 miles of roads, with sidewalks, crosswalks.
And is that out 700 miles outside of what the DOT covers, or
Yes.
700 miles total?
No, just the city of Greenville's maintenance area
Okay.
is 700
700 miles
miles.
of roads.
And you can imagine that with many of the major thoroughfares, Greenville Boulevard, Memorial, Dickinson. I mean, there's so many major corridors throughout the city that are maintained by the state of North Carolina. And other than being on the MPO, which is the planning organization and working with the state, that's their call on those roads. Well, we've been getting several million every year, but in my work and study, it became clear to me over the past decade, rather than putting this money towards actual road maintenance, we've been using it, the city has, in previous councils and others, in other areas. We had years where we were using less than 300,000+ a year in actual road and infrastructure resurfacing.
So it was sent back to us to use for that purpose, but we didn't use it.
Well, it was used for
Basically.
related items, which within the focus area,
No.
it could be used in other areas. But that's why a year ago, I called a timeout. And I said,
Right.
folks, we're on the edge of something here significant for this city. How can you grow the economy of this city if your roads and infrastructure are crumbling?
Right.
How can I go out and pitch a company to come here if the foundation of what we're going to build on is eroding
Exactly.
and we aren't showing the foresight to be planning for our future? Your road infrastructure, what we do now, is what's going to grow Greenville in 2025, 2035, and 2040. And what our
right.
predecessors did, our parents and grandparents over the past number of decades, their decisions are what we're benefiting from now. So I basically called a halt a year ago and said, we're going to take available funds, which we had set aside during the recession economy in case the property values continue to drop. They did not. We waited a year and actually the property values stabilized and actually increased a bit. So we dedicated $4 million for the first time an actual true infusion in over a decade into resurfacing, getting our roads back in shape. Now, the key thing to understand about your roads and infrastructure, and you know this if you have a property or your own, if you're not maintaining that property, you're setting yourself up for a big fall. Whereas right now, if you have a proper rotation of improving your roads, that should be about a 25-year resurfacing rotation all throughout the city. Per lane mile, that should be about $10,000 or so once we get the micro resurfacing in place. If you allow the roads to erode to a point where you've lacked maintenance and you've lacked upkeep, it could cost in excess of $500,000 to $1 million per lane mile to go in and dig that road out and fix that. So you tell me, when we did our road diagnostic over 700 miles in Greenville, we found that close to 100 miles of road in the city of Greenville are near crumbling within the city. Now, we can save much of that now if we made a real concerted, if we attack the road situation over the next several years, then we'll have an infrastructure as good as Cary, North Carolina, as good as any community across the state. But if we don't, if we allow it to continue, just like if your surface of your home was starting to fall apart, the rest of your infrastructure is going to fall apart. We will be looking at multi-millions. That's why we put money in, and then we also, and I'll be the first to say, I feel that we should put it to the voters. I did at that point 6 months ago, put it to the voters and say, I'm not one to say a tax increase that basically is a blank check, or one that goes on forever. What I liked about the concept of a bond referendum is it has a designated period of time with a sunset. And not just that, it gives the city the chance to make your case on why it makes sense to fix your roads and infrastructure for your future, and you let the voters make that decision on such a big item.
Exactly.
Now,
No,
the parks component and the facilities component, those were all added by the 4-2 block of council. That was not part of something that Councilmember Smith or myself or
to do
Glover.
with the maintenance, yeah.
Right, and the parks component as well, which they decided they expanded this from what my suggestion was. Now we need to get on these roads now. If you don't do it, it'll be 3 years before you get it done, and then we're going to be paying times 10 in repairs. Do the referendum now. Have it on November's ballot. Tell the citizens why it makes sense to do it now. Wanting to build new parks and other things are wonderful when the time's appropriate, when the economy is thriving. Yeah. But right now, we have a fundamental issue. Do you want your city counting its money, in the bank, or do you want them putting your money, your tax dollars, to work, making your infrastructure strong? Then I can pitch to a company. I can pitch to a business about our investment in this infrastructure in our city. And I'm still passionate about that. We still need to find a way to move forward despite the 4-2 block.
Well, we are going to have to take our second commercial break. We're on with Mayor Alan Thomas. We'll be back in 2 minutes to wrap up the show with some good things going on in Greenville.
Welcome back to our show, Greenville Grit. Terry Williams here with Michael Overton and a very special guest, our mayor, Alan Thomas. Thank you so much for being here. You've provided a huge amount of information. Before we move on to some great things going on in Greenville, let's thank our sponsors one more time.
The Ribeye Steakhouse, again, through next Wednesday.
That's right.
Go mention Greenville Grit at Ribeye Steakhouse. You get a 25% discount for 1 week.
Yep, till next Wednesday.
That's right. We got Greenville Toyota also and the Overton Group. You've got to thank the sponsors. The show would not be here without them.
Do we get a 25% discount at Greenville Toyota if we show up and
you
mention
talk
the show?
You can talk
talk to Goes
I'll
about
let
that.
him handle that with you.
All right,
Alan. We've talked about bonds and a little bit about bonds. We talked about the road stuff, infrastructure, city council budget. We always somehow harp on the stuff that's not fun, but there's good things going on in the city right now. So give us some updates on some of the positive projects going on in Greenville, things that people can be excited about coming.
Well, if you're a Greenville resident, you should be very excited, and we are. It's a privilege to live in this city. It's a great place. There's so much energy here. A university setting, a medical setting, and so many people have, generations have been in this city, and I love Greenville. I'm raising my kids here, and we had such an exciting time this summer, here in Greenville.
Right.
So many things going on, but what I am really excited about is the investments being made here in partnership with the private sector across this city. There are so many projects right now, job-creating projects, not the result of government, but the result of laying the groundwork for government, making it easier for business to be able to locate here in Greenville and to grow. There are several major announcements coming up in the next several months that I'm tentatively crossing my fingers. I'm very excited about.
Right.
But the main thing, which is most visible for everyone, is our uptown area is extremely important and vital to every city. Your uptown, your downtown area is the front porch of your community. And either it is thriving or it is falling backwards. And I'm pleased to say over the past several years, through a handful of individuals, a good number rolling up their sleeves, not by vote of council,
Right.
but sitting down with many of our city fathers and folks in the private sector, and we've had over $100 million of investment in our uptown area in the past 2 years. That didn't happen by a vote,
Right.
although having economic components that we've been focused on has definitely sent a signal. It's happened by cooperation. It's happened by Vidant and ECU finally investing along with the city
Right.
in uptown, putting their money where their mouth is. It's happened by several major projects, restaurants, a hotel in the works, major retail, major residential, over 580 beds, which
Right.
will be here opening up. So much happening in the heart of our city. The ECU themselves, which major investments, you probably saw the announcement yesterday,
Yep.
$180 million coming to the university for major projects, a brand new
It's all going to be right
center
here, that's
replacement,
uptown.
all in that center city
That's right.
area. And I've said this many times, but I'll say it again. If you haven't been in Greenville, if you have a family member or friends that haven't been here, and they come back towards the end of 2015, they are going to be blown away with the progress
You're
in this
right.
community.
Well, it's amazing what's happened just in the last 2 or 3 years in Uptown with the Taft Ward project and like you said, the number of restaurants and federal bankruptcy court being built down there,
That's
ECU
right.
opening some offices down there, Community Smith, hopefully talks to renovating the theater and down the road.
We're
I mean,
looking
some
for your
things-
donation to do that. That's not going to be a city
well,
project.
No.
I tell you what, I'm going to have to
It
see a
never
good
was
business
intended
plan.
to be a city
No,
project.
and you know that.
It never was
Because
intended.
I did put money in the Turner Theater in Washington, and it went bankrupt. And I know some people bought it, but I need to see a good business plan.
But we
for us
do
with that.
want entertainment and culture inside the area, so we're going to continue to work on that, work with the university to bring that talent there.
All right,
We're
we
excited.
got to wrap it up. Thank you for joining in. We'll see you next Wednesday, 6:30.